Welcome to Paper 1 Unit 4, Communication. This unit is shorter than many others and it's usually one of the easiest to score well in. However, recent exams have introduced a few tricky and confusing questions, so having a clear understanding of the basics is more important than ever. Many learners actually enjoy this part because it is practical, easy to relate to, and scoring. Usually, you'll find 4 to 5 questions from this unit, and with a clear understanding of basic ideas, you can confidently get all of them right. At its heart, communication simply means sharing ideas and meanings between two or more people. Human beings communicate in every possible way through signs, expressions, gestures, sounds, and even small noises. The same principle applies in teaching. When communication in the classroom is clear and connected to real life, students understand better and can apply what they learn in everyday situations. Now, here are some ideas that you should keep at your fingertips because they have often appeared in exam. First, communication is inevitable. We cannot not communicate. Even silence sends a message. Second, communication is cultural, meaning that the way we speak, behave, and express ourselves is shaped by the culture we belong to. Third, communication is irreversible. Once you express something, you cannot fully take it back because the message has already reached the listener. Communication also plays important roles in society. It helps increase public awareness of educational rights, improves the quality of policy making, and strengthens educational service delivery. And remember, communication is essential for social interaction, for messages to be understood, and for sharing experiences, all three of which have also been asked in exam. Before we move ahead, let's clear the meaning of the word itself. The term communication comes from the Latin communicar or communis, which means to share or to make common. Sharing is at the core of communication. It involves giving, receiving, and understanding messages, whether we speak, write, listen, or read. A good communicator listens carefully, speaks clearly, and respects others' viewpoints. In its simplest form, communication is a process where a sender transmits a message and a receiver interprets it. Communication also helps promote values that support the enculturation of people, meaning it teaches individuals how to become part of a society. Something interesting and asked in exam is that the words communication, community, and communion are all related by origin. This reminds us that communication always aims to create connection. Another important point, also asked in exam, is that meaning construction happens through choices. We choose words, tones, and symbols, and that choice shapes meaning. Some scholars say that communication reflects a person's primary group identity. Others argue that we should always understand communication within the larger social structure. To make communication effective, experts suggest 3 golden rules. You must be heard, you must be understood, and you must be appreciated. These principles also appear in exam from time to time. Communication is built on a shared symbolic environment. Signs interact with each other. Interpretation differs from person to person. And while the channel itself remains neutral, the meaning is shaped by context. Communication strengthens social bonds, supports relationships, and even reaches non-participants through symbols and shared culture. Now, let's look at some well-known definitions of communication. Many scholars explain it in different ways, but the core remains the same. Murphy, Hildebrandt, and Thomas describe communication as an exchange of verbal and non-verbal messages. Keith Davis calls it the process of passing information and achieving understanding. John Adair highlights making contact and being understood, while Peter Little emphasizes transmitting information so that the receiver truly grasps it. Newman and Summer talk about exchanging ideas and emotions, and Louise Allen sees communication as a continuous meaning-making process. A few exam-related statements are very important here. Communication can be a path to seek truth. and at the same time, it can also be used to suppress truth. Communication is social interaction through messages, and it is continuously evolving. It includes the sending, receiving, and interpreting of messages, which has also appeared in exam. Language plays a special role. It gives us a grid to understand reality. Another point that the exam has tested. And remember, human communication always involves message transmission, reception, and both verbal and non-verbal elements. This combination has also been asked in exam. A truly competent communicator is someone who is culturally sensitive, ethically grounded, and a careful listener. These qualities help communication become meaningful, respectful, and effective. We begin with the cultural aspects of communication. Communication does not happen in a vacuum. Every message we send or receive is shaped by the culture we come from. This is why communication across cultures is sometimes called cross-cultural or intercultural communication. It studies how people from different backgrounds express ideas through both words and non-verbal signals. Culture passes on its values through everyday practices, especially through parenting. Parents teach children how to speak, how to behave, and how to respond to others. Through these small interactions, cultural values move from one generation to the next. And here is something important which has been asked in exam. Communication is a practice deeply tied to the formation of social life. Without communication, no society can function. Another point worth noting is that the family is considered a primary cultural institution, and this has also been mentioned in exam. Families shape the first lessons of communication: tone, politeness, respect, and emotional expression. This is why cultures differ so much in gestures, eye contact, personal space, and preferred communication styles. Now, in cultural communication, several things affect how messages are understood. Sometimes a specific cultural context defines what a message really means. A gesture that is polite in one culture may be rude in another. A contrasting style may change how a message is presented, even though the meaning stays the same. A random order of ideas can confuse listeners, while a non-specific context may leave room for misinterpretation. Good communication also depends on being culturally sensitive, meaning we respect different perspectives, and on being ethical, which helps maintain trust and integrity. And of course, being an effective listener is essential because we have to understand fully before we respond. One more idea has been asked in exam. When information comes from popular sources, such as well-known figures or widely trusted channels, audiences tend to remember it better. This is why advertisements often use celebrities, their messages get more attention and recall. And finally, there is a special term you must remember. A culture untouched by alphabetic writing is known as a culture of primary orality, and this has also appeared in exam. Such cultures rely entirely on spoken communication, storytelling, and memory. Now let's move to the semiotic aspects of communication, which study how meaning is created through signs and symbols. A simple definition of communication from a semiotic perspective is this: it is the act of generating meaning by using signs that both sides understand. Semiotics is the study of signs, anything that stands for something else. This approach to content analysis has been asked in exam. According to the semiotic tradition, communication works through the mediation of signs, another point that has appeared in exam. Semiotics tells us that meaning does not come from the sign alone, it comes from semiosis, the process of interpreting the sign. Meaning depends on the interpreter. 10 people may look at the same symbol and understand 10 different things. That is why signs shape perception, influence how we see reality, and determine how effective a message is. Signs work differently across cultures. They can be linguistic, visual, or even non-visual, such as gestures, colors, images, or sounds. They appear in media, advertising, films, design, and storytelling. Semiotics also gives us various categories of signs, such as indicators, causal signs like thunder predicting a storm, and medical signs that help diagnose illness. Many signs are gesture-based, while others function symbolically. One of the most important ideas here is that signs gain meaning through a network of relations. Signs and symbols depend on one another, and this internal relationship helps produce meaning, a concept that has been asked in exam. Because signs form this network, interpreters can make sense of messages even if they are not directly involved in the communication situation. Communication therefore presupposes a shared symbolic environment, a point that also appears in exam questions. Through shared signs, communities form a sense of belonging. And as another exam-based idea puts it, this shared environment leads to social interaction which helps create a sense of community. Finally, signs are often considered secondary products of the message, meaning they help carry the message but are not the message itself. This idea too has been noted in exam. Symbols can take many forms. They might be words, images, sounds, or any sign that carries meaning. And here's something important that has been asked in exam. Words themselves act as symbols because they stand for ideas or objects. When we say tree, the sound doesn't look like a tree. We just agree that it refers to one. That agreement shows how symbols are both arbitrary and conventional. Their meanings come from cultural understanding rather than natural connection. This brings us to another key point. Symbols are deeply socio-cultural. Their meanings come from the communities that use them, and this fact has been tested in exam. A single image may mean one thing in one culture and something completely different in another. That is why symbols only make sense when we understand the cultural context, another detail that has appeared in exam. Some symbols are widely understood across the world. For example, the red octagon sign almost everywhere means stop. But many symbols are more localized, understood only within a smaller group. This idea that symbols are usually understood within a group has also been asked in exam. Symbols also appear in religious, political, and everyday settings. They can be concrete, like a national flag, or abstract, like the idea of justice. They help us communicate more powerfully by adding layers of meaning to our messages. Sometimes, a single idea may even have many different symbols depending on the language or culture. Not all symbols are interpretive or emotional. Some are purely mechanical, like the signs used in computer coding or data processing, where meaning is fixed and context is limited. Others may be non-ritualistic, meaning they don't carry deep cultural or spiritual significance. And sometimes labels or symbols may be ambiguous, a point that, again, has appeared in exam. When we study symbols seriously, we often explore the field called semiotics, which is the study of signs and their meanings. A major figure in this field is Charles Sanders Peirce, who classified signs into icons, indices, and symbols, a classification that has been asked in exam. Icons look like what they represent, indices point to something through connection, and symbols rely entirely on cultural agreement. Semiotics also reminds us that communication itself is a symbolic process, something that has been tested in exam. Communication happens when people use symbols to interpret meaning within their environment. We use a set of symbolic systems called codes to send messages. The term codes refers to the communication stimuli that help us convey meaning, and this definition has appeared in exam. These codes are never fully neutral. They always carry meanings and reflect certain perspectives. This idea that codes are never neutral has been asked in exam as well. Semiotics also explains that signs gain meaning not on their own but through a network of relationships. Another detail that has been tested: a word gains meaning because of the words around it, the context, and the cultural expectations. To understand symbols more clearly, we often rely on 3 levels of semiotic rules. First, the pragmatic level, which looks at the relationship between signs and the people who use them. Second, the semantic level, which focuses on what signs represent their meanings and references. And third, the syntactic level, which studies the formal structure and arrangement of signs. Together, these levels show how symbols help us make sense of our world. Whether in language, art, politics, religion, or technology, symbols allow us to communicate meanings that would be impossible to express directly. They quietly shape everything we understand and everything we share with one another.